Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines tonight with the political editor of the Daily Mirror, Pippa Crerar, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. They will be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's have a look at what is on some of those front pages. Russia on a collision course with West over Ukraine, says The Guardian, with the UK set to respond with tough sanctions. The Financial Times reports President Vladimir Putin is poised to recognise eastern Ukraine's two breakaway regions by redrawing borders. The Daily Telegraph has President Putin warning of bloodshed and reports that Russian forces are being sent into Ukraine to keep the peace in breakaway areas. On COVID restrictions, the Metro says it's now over to you as the Prime Minister urges people to take personal responsibility for self-isolation. The Daily Mail reports it's been 701 days since we were first told to stay home. Now, Boris Johnson throws off the shackles. And the Eye also leads with the scrapping of COVID restrictions. Pay for your own tests is part of the new COVID plan, it says. And there is a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers, all while watching us. And we are joined tonight by Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Thank you very much to both of you for being with us this evening. Let's start with the story dominating most of the front pages tonight and the front of the Financial Times, certainly. Putin recognises two breakaway republics in eastern Ukraine. And now this news that we touched on there in the Telegraph mentioned that Putin is sending peacekeeping, well, I say peacekeeping in inverted commas, troops to Donetsk and to Luhansk. Harry Cole, is this war?
It's an incredibly fast-moving situation. What we have is President Putin saying he's sending in these so-called peacekeepers to a so-called republic, breakaway republic. But what is actually he's suggesting is he's threatening to send in Russian troops to a sovereign country. Now, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden could not have been clearer. Boris Johnson said to The Sun just 2 weeks ago, if one steel toe-cap Russian boot crosses, one toe-cap of one boot crosses into sovereign Ukraine territory, then a steel trap of sanctions will spring down. We'll wait and see whether that really does happen tonight. I fear that the slightly sort of messy way in which Putin has done this might actually fracture what was already a pretty wobbly Western coalition. I have a horrible feeling some European countries, some of those ones who haven't been quite pulling their weight, will be wobbling tonight. France already saying that they want their talks planned for Thursday with President Putin and his officials to carry on going ahead. That doesn't look to me like a united steel trap coming down swiftly on President Putin, as it should be.
Well, The Guardian, funny enough, saying a similar thing to you there. Putin puts Russia on collision course with the West over Ukraine. Doesn't necessarily say how united or not that West might be. Pippa, how embroiled now do you think the West will get if this does become a war? What level of involvement will the West allow itself to have, given the hangover of Afghanistan last summer?
Well, that's the big question, what happens next? And up until this point, there has been a fairly unified response beyond, with the hope that the diplomatic solution could still exist, support for the French attempting to set up more talks. But both the US and the UK, as Harry rightly says, being much more cautious about the prospects of that being successful. Nevertheless, they were all attempting to find diplomatic routes. There's been many conversations between Western leaders and Vladimir Putin in recent weeks, but it's sadly looking increasingly likely that that's not going to happen. And now the question is, do they support, if that steel-capped boot does step over into either Donetsk or Luhansk, but Russian troops, despite the messy way that this has come about, does the West react in the way that it has promised that it will do? Does that involve economic and military support for the Ukraine? Although, of course, Britain has said that there wouldn't be any British troops on the ground. Does it involve the crippling sanctions that we've been promised by Liz Truss in the UK, by the US, and indeed tonight by the European Union as well? can they unite and do that together as one, rather than a sort of a disparate selection of measures which are opposed against different aspects of the Russian regime? Do they boot out some of these kleptocrats from Western cities? We'll have to see. The resolve is currently there. Whether that they're able to put that political resolve into political action, and crucially, as Harry says, do it together, is another question tonight, I'm afraid.
Certainly, and I wonder what, Harry, you think about that. Those sanctions, they have been gradually beefed up over the last weeks. Are there any form of economic sanctions, certainly, that could actually do anything, that would make any difference with Putin at this stage?
Well, yeah, look, they can drive a massive wedge between Putin and his oligarch class. You can make life extremely difficult for rich, wealthy Russian business people around the world, especially in London. You can kick off companies off the London Stock Exchange, Russian-linked companies, Russian companies themselves, who have had a free run in London for too long. Now, whether that's going to have any effect on Putin depends on his state of mind. There's people are split into two camps. Is he actually being cold, ruthless and logical here, or is he lost his mind a little bit? Everyone's got a different opinion on that. But frankly, it feels to me like all the warning signs have been there that actually, I'm pretty sure the message he's been given privately to diplomats and politicians visiting Russia and talking to his officials is, frankly, you can stick your sanctions. I don't care. This is about Russian pride. This is about a restoration of the Russian Federation's greatness. This is that mad speech he gave today about how he essentially said Ukraine's a made-up country. It doesn't exist. We're going to do what we want. It does feel a little bit like we're slightly howling at the wind, and Putin respects force. And I honestly think this situation wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been given inch after inch after inch over the last few years. First of all, the Americans were sanctioning under Donald Trump any efforts by Gazprom to build the Nord Stream 2 gas connection into the European Union. The White House took an incredibly firm line against that, tried to shut it down. Biden comes into office, lifts those sanctions, allows it to come forward. Now we've got all this dither about whether the Germans, what would count as enough of an incursion into Ukraine before the Germans would pull the plug on that incredibly controversial gas project.
Of course. So, Harry, sorry to interrupt you, but we are short on time. I just want to bring some breaking news that we've had from Number 10, saying that the Prime Minister will chair a Cobra meeting tomorrow at 6:30 in the morning to discuss those latest developments in Ukraine. Also to agree and coordinate the UK response, including a significant package of sanctions to be introduced immediately. Well, let's bring that back to Pippa and Harry. Pippa, on that, I mean, if we go back to our front pages, the photos of Putin in that long, rambling speech that he made on the front of many, including the Daily Telegraph, warning of bloodshed as he moves his troops. We were just talking about those sanctions. What do you make of that the Prime Minister will be chairing a Cobra meeting tomorrow at 6:30? Do you think there could be something new to come from that? Sanctions we haven't heard of yet? Investments, foreign investments that might be changed?
Yeah, well, Liz Truss suggested earlier this evening that we'd start to see the sanctions, details of the sanctions being put into place from tomorrow. So presumably this meeting is sort of getting to grips with how they're going to do that. Obviously, over the last couple of weeks, they've gone through the legislative process so that there is a package that is tougher than the existing sanctions regime that they had at their disposal is ready to go. And I think we can probably expect, depending on what happens in the next couple of days in the region, in Ukraine, to see that being imposed. Is obviously the US has already said that in the two breakaway regions of Ukraine, which Donetsk and Luhansk, that it's bringing in sanctions and preventing US investment and business being done in those. And also, I think we should expect more sanctions focused on Moscow and the Kremlin itself. Obviously, Britain has got a long history of dealing with Russian aggression through these means ever since the Salisbury poisoning. But it has to go broader than that, really. I think when you get to the point of the sort of incursions that we're seeing threatened right on Europe's doorstep. I mean, if this does erupt into a full-scale conflict, it is, as Boris Johnson and others have said, likely to be incredibly bloody and the biggest scale conflict in Europe since the Second World War. And that's not something that anybody wants to see. So any measure which can be taken, whether it's sanctions, whether it's military support, economic support rather for the Ukraine, whether it's any deterrence at all that it can place on Putin, it's got to be worth a go.
Yeah, Pippa, thank you. As ever, the paper's struggling to keep up with this. There is more breaking news. A phone call now between Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which it was said they both condemned Russia's move, and the Prime Minister said he would explore sending extra defence support to Ukraine after Putin recognised the independence of the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, the political editor of the Daily Mirror, Pippa Crerar, and the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole. Thanks both for staying with us. Let's go straight. I'm afraid Ukraine hasn't left us much time to talk about the other big story of the day, the COVID restrictions lifting. Front page of the Metro, Prime Minister, now it's over to you, urging personal responsibility. Pippa, is this throwing off the shackles of COVID restrictions, do you think, or is it too much too soon?
Well, I think, life has returned to more or less normal for a lot of people in England, and these are sort of the final touches to the restrictions that the Tory right had been pushing for, the legal restrictions that were still in place about self-isolation, and then also the decision to withdraw free testing from April the 1st. I think the problem for the Prime Minister is that while, of course, many people are ready to move on, the scientists, and in fact the Prime Minister himself, made clear tonight the pandemic is not yet over, and there's a bit of a dispute, it seems, about how quickly you can press the button to restart some of these protections and the testing regime, should a new variant, a worse variant, appear in future. Boris Johnson seems convinced tonight that they would be able to do that, although even the ONS survey has been scaled back, which is sort of the key bit of surveillance, if you like, on the spread of future variants. And of course, there are concerns that while he's asked people to use their personal responsibility to take care and to be cautious, he hasn't given them the tools to do so, because obviously the key one of those is testing and the ability to know whether they're positive or not.
Pippa, I want to give a quick word to Harry on this as well. We've got about a minute left, not even. What do you make of it?
I think, COVID has slightly become a bit of a culture war, a bit like Brexit did. I'm afraid it's really depressing. But the people that hate Boris Johnson are screaming tonight that he's going to kill millions, and the people, the people that want their freedoms back are delighted. Somewhere in the centre, there's most normal people trying to wonder what to do. I think the sort of public have slightly voted with their feet on these things. Things feel like they've got back to normal. This was only a natural progression from that.
I'm so sorry to have to cut you off. We'll be talking about this in the next hour. Do stay with us here on Sky News.